Have you ever stood in a museum staring at a 500-year-old painting and felt absolutely nothing? And then you feel dumb, like you're missing something. If you just tried harder, you'd maybe get it. But what if your gut feeling was right? What if most what we call high culture was never about beauty or truth at all? Yet at the same time, we get more provoked by the destruction of a painting in a museum than by the death of the planet we live on. Why is that? And what if right now, for the first time in history, you have the chance starting to break free? This video isn't about paintings. It's about everything you've been told to admire and the lies deeply hidden underneath all of it. You ever noticed how nobody really wants to go into a museum unless it's air-conditioned and there's a decent cafe attached? I do like art, or the idea of it. But getting me into a museum is harder than convincing me that jet fuel can melt steel beams. That was a joke for the older audience. Anyway, I always asked myself, what's wrong with me? Am I not cultured? Am I so brain fried from too much Nickelodeon and the Cartoon Network as a kid? I couldn't accept that. So I did some digging, to have an excuse not to go. Turns out that feeling was not a moral failing. It's actually your gut detecting a scam. Because art, high art, the kind that's mounted in hushed marble rooms, is not what you think it is. It was never about truth, beauty, or genius. It was about power. Always. From the very beginning, art was a PR operation for the elite. It told stories, but very specific stories. Stories about who deserved power, who deserved punishment, and what counted as good and true. And crucially, it told you what taste was supposed to be. And guess what? You don't have it. Take the Renaissance. Everyone loves to talk about the flowering of genius, humanism. Michelangelo lying on scaffolding, painting the Sistine Chapel, fresking his fingers away, sacrificing his back, as a man over 30, under the ceiling for the love of art. No. If we look closer, we see that the Renaissance was bankrolled by families like the Medici, the original billionaire bankers. They didn't sponsor art out of kindness, they commissioned art to legitimize their power. Cosimo de' Medici paid architects to redesign Florence's churches and squares to glorify his family name, not God. Lorenzo de' Medici sponsored artists like Botticelli specifically to connect himself with mythological ideas of beauty, wisdom, and divine rule. Renaissance paintings of Medici family members specifically disguised them as saints. Medici-funded portraits often depicted the family with halos, wearing Roman togas, framed like biblical heroes. Churches, redesigned by their architects, conveniently placed the Medici family crests everywhere, making worship inseparable from dynastic loyalty. The message was simple: we are ordained by God in human greatness. Love us, respect us, fear us. And people did. Owning a Botticelli was never about private pleasure. It was bragging rights. It was the Renaissance version of posting a Lamborghini on Instagram. Starting in the 17th century, European elites opened private salons and galleries, but only to their circles. Art collections were power displays, like fortresses, not community spaces. The Louvre, today the most famous public museum, only opened to the general public after the French Revolution forced it out of royal hands. Before that, it was just another palace trophy room for the king. Art was never designed to be for everyone. It was for insiders, to remind outsiders who mattered, who was in, and more importantly, who was out. And it wasn't just flattering rich people. Art was a weapon for oppression. Let's go back to the Middle Ages and look at Christian art. Religious paintings didn't just show angels and saints, they showed enemies. Witches, heretics, Jews, in twisted, monstrous forms. Witches were depicted with classic anti-Semitic features. Hooked noses, animal faces, grotesque postures. And guess why? Because in the areas of Europe where Jews have early been ousted, they had to find someone else. So the depiction of a witch was created in the image of Judas himself. Why? To manufacture fear of the kings who needed divine justification for their rule. To justify violence against those who didn't want to bow to the faith which gave them legitimacy. Early cathedrals in Germany and France transformed ethnic slurs against Jews into their imagery right onto the facades. Grotesque, dehumanizing depictions 700 years before the Nazis even showed up. Every time villagers entered church, they saw proof that Jews were demonic. It was architectural brainwashing at scale. Martin Luther's own sermons cited these grotesque sculptures as evidence of Jewish evil. These images stayed visible for centuries without removal, influencing generations. Art didn't just reflect bias, it created it. It institutionalized hate. But now everything has changed, right? Now museums display art because of its significance for human achievement, right? Art still worships the same gods, money and power. They just can't write that on buildings anymore, so they needed to get a bit more creative. And what's worse than ethnic minorities? You guessed it, paying your fair share of taxes. Showtime for the modern art tax scam. Step 1. A wealthy collector buys up every available piece from a promising new artist. Step 2. They artificially inflate the artist's market value by staging high-profile sales between themselves or connected buyers, and get a friendly appraiser to declare the works priceless. Well, not priceless, you need a specific number for tax fraud. Step 3. Donate a few of your now high-value works to a museum. And the final step, get a massive tax break by deducting the value of your donations from your income. I could provide you with some recent examples, but I really don't need a slapsuit right now. Just Google it. Braver men than I spill the beans on those already. By the way, did you know that it's spelled SLAPP and stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation? I always thought they just come by and slap you with the papers. Anyway, the result of this tax scam, billionaires creating billion-dollar assets out of thin air, under the guise of supporting the arts. And us? We stand there at the museum admiring their accounting tricks. I guess it is something to admire if you're into accounting. But it gets even worse. Art didn't just decide what pictures we hang up. It infected everything. Fashion. Elites declared silk gowns and powdered wigs as elegant, and peasants who wore rough wool were ugly. Food. French aristocrats defined haute cuisine, tiny portions, expensive sauces as refined. Poor people's hearty stews were dismissed as vulgar. Yeah, who wants to be not hungry anymore when you're done with your meal? Peasants do. Music. Court composers like Bach and Mozart wrote intricate symphonies, not because peasants couldn't enjoy them, but because complexity itself became a marker of class superiority. Sociologist Pierre Bourdieu coined it bluntly. Taste classifies, and it classifies the classifier. Which means, when you like elite art, you're not just liking it, you are proving you belong. It's why we still feel guilty preferring a trashy pop song over a 3-hour opera. So when you drag your feet through a museum, thinking you're supposed to feel something profound, you have to understand. You're walking through centuries of curated lies. Culture, the official kind, was never made for you. It was made to control you. But later, everything changed. Pop culture crashed onto the scene. Radios, records, rock stars, rebel movies, and for the first time, culture belonged to the people. Nah. When you hear the word pop culture, you probably think freedom, democracy, finally culture for me. Movies, TV, rock music, comic books, all breaking the stiff colors of high art, right? Well, pop culture was a rebellion, but not as pure as it seemed. It was and is another system of control, just with more rock and roll. When mass media emerged, radio, television, blockbuster, cinema, it wasn't just for the people, it was designed for the masses in the most strategic, engineered way possible. Studios, record labels, and television networks weren't trying to democratize taste, they were trying to program it. In the 1950s and 60s, the American music industry had about 50 record labels competing nationally. Today, it's down to 3 conglomerates controlling about 70% of the global music market. Every major trend, every summer hit, every overnight success was largely manufactured long before you heard it. They didn't discover what we liked, they taught us what to like. This wasn't a conspiracy, it was capitalism doing what it does, standardizing production to maximize profit and control. Jaws, Star Wars, all mass-tested, merchandised and franchised. Taste is still top-down. You might think, well okay, but at least pop culture is more democratic than high culture. Sure, but it's still curated by gatekeepers, just wearing different clothes. Take the Oscars. The Academy Awards are supposed to be the best in world cinema, right? And the best actors. I vividly remember as a kid watching the Oscars for the first time and thinking to myself, wow, what an effort to find the very best actors in the whole world every year. They must go to every town, every country on the planet in order to make that assessment. Sweet, innocent child. You can imagine how confused I was to see the same faces on the red carpet every year. The Oscars aren't a mirror of talent. They are a billboard for the empire. And remember the Cold War? The United States didn't just send missiles overseas, it sent movies, TV shows, pop stars. Cultural imperialism through blue jeans, Coca-Cola and Michael Jackson was a real Cold War strategy, trying to counter-program Soviet ideology. The CIA literally funded cultural journals, jazz tours and art exhibitions to make capitalism look cooler than communism. Didn't really need much help there. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had its own version, sponsoring heroic worker films, monumental art and operas to reinforce collectivist ideas. And that's why they lost. Who wants to dream about working in a coal mine when you can dream about Jabba the Hutt? Culture became weaponized soft power, not just entertainment. The battlefield was your living room. So while pop culture felt looser, freer, more rebellious, it was and still is a power structure. Just faster, louder and with better soundtracks. You go Hans, ich sehe dich. Instead of bishops and bankers telling you what's beautiful, it was brands, moguls and multinational corporations. Just like old art reinforced class superiority, modern pop culture often reinforces national, racial and corporate hierarchies too. Which movies get awards? The ones backed by prestige distributors. Which TV shows define generations? The ones mass-marketed to hit demographic targets, not necessarily artistic genius. In short, pop culture didn't overthrow old power. It repackaged it in 16:9. And yet even this system, mighty as it was, couldn't contain everything forever. Because then, on January 1st, 1983, something saw the light of day that would change the world more than Michelangelo's back pain and Harvey Weinstein's showers ever could. And all hell broke loose. After centuries of art galleries, marble statues, pop, Star Wars and Oscar campaigns, something unexpected had happened. Everyone got a printing press, everyone got a spot on the wall in the Sistine Chapel, and eventually back pain. Okay, enough with the back pain. The internet was born. Suddenly, anyone, anywhere could create. No gilded hallways, no record deals, no museum curators. Just a Wi-Fi signal and an audience. Well, back then you had to get off the phone first. Again, some love to the older folks. It was the closest thing to real cultural democracy humanity had ever seen. You didn't need to be born a Medici. You didn't need to impress a Hollywood agent. You just needed a meme that slapped, a TikTok that hit, a song that found the right ears. In the early 2000s, it felt like the walls had collapsed. YouTube, DeviantArt, SoundCloud, fanfiction forums, Tumblr, art was everywhere. Taste was wild. Virality was pure chaos. Nobody planned it, nobody controlled it. For a moment it felt like culture was finally ours. But keeping freedom is harder than it seems. And here's the problem. Systems don't die that easily. The old powers adapted, fast. Platforms that once enabled chaos became gatekeepers themselves. Algorithms replaced aristocrats, curating what we see but in subtler, more addictive ways. Attention itself became the commodity, and shaping your taste was the profit model. On TikTok, it's estimated that about 1% of creators drive 99% of total views. And guess what? Most of those creators are increasingly signed to agencies, record labels, and corporate partnerships. The cycle rebuilds itself. Just faster, just harder to see. It's not that we are forced to like things, it's that we're nudged, suggested, repeated until we think it was our idea. Even the things that seem spontaneous often aren't. Label executives now launch singles first on TikTok, paying influencers to use them in organic dances before the official song releases. By the time the song drops on Spotify, it already is a hit, even before the first second was streamed. Our brains, wired to prefer the familiar, eat it up. And millions stream it thinking, wow, I'm so early, I discovered this. No, you didn't, Rebecca. It's not pure democracy, it's democracy managed. Even our emotional attachments are leveraged. Take the endless Disney live-action remakes. Recycling beloved properties not because we asked, but because statistically nostalgia triggers bigger opening weekends. In a truly free culture, we'd constantly create new myths. In a managed culture, we remake old ones. The goal isn't just to sell you a movie, it's to tether your emotions back to familiar, controllable brands. So, are we doomed? No, because here's the good news. Even with all the algorithms, marketing machines, and nostalgia mines, the internet still leaks. We still get flashes of true chaotic energy. The Harlem Shake explosion started as a dumb meme mutated into a global phenomenon with no clear origin point. Sea shanties became a TikTok hit during the pandemic. Zero corporate planning. Memes like NPC Wojak or Lost.jpg forming entire folk cultures online. No curator could have predicted those. No billionaire could have manufactured them. The cultural underground is harder to kill than it looks. But the truth is, to keep that chaos alive, to keep culture ours, we have to fight for it consciously. Because every system left unchecked reverts back to control. Which sounds outrageous, but let's talk about outrage for a second. Picture this. Protesters from the last generation smear orange paint across the glass protection of a 300-year-old painting. They do it to draw attention to climate collapse, an issue that affects literally everyone breathing air right now. And what happens? We lose our minds. The news explodes. Social media floods with furious comments. Politicians denounce the vandalism with more passion than they've ever shown for the Amazon rainforest burning. You'd think someone had personally touched the Mona Lisa, like Weinstein. It is conditioned reverence. We were trained to behave like this. Not consciously, not maliciously, but deeply. From a young age, we are taught that certain things, great art, great institutions, high culture, are sacred. Paintings by dead elites, sacred. Oil executives funding museums, invisible. The breathable atmosphere, optional apparently. It's not about logic, it's about emotional hierarchy, baked into us through generations of cultural messaging. Respect the artwork, respect the history, respect the system, even when the system is killing you. Here's the deeper trick. Art conservation taught us a bigger metaphor. Important things must not change. We spend millions preserving old paintings, but hesitate to change industries poisoning the planet. Why? Because the same mindset underpins both. Stability over chaos. Familiarity over discomfort. Legacy over revolution. Protecting a 500-year-old canvas feels noble. Challenging a billion-dollar oil pipeline feels radical, even though it's vastly more urgent. We've been trained to preserve symbols over substance. Manufactured nostalgia for systems that hurt us. It's not just art. It's statues, it's monuments, it's institutions. We're conditioned to mourn the decay of structures that were never built for us, more than the suffering of people today. The endless fights over Confederate monuments in the US. Some argue it's about heritage. But whose heritage? Yours, working a minimum wage job nearby what was once a great manor of some rich dude? And what harm does a bronze statue suffer compared to a living community under oppression? The same impulse is at play when we cry over a painting being smudged but shrug at a flooded city. We grieve symbols, not ourselves. Because grieving for ourselves would mean confronting the reality that the systems in play have failed us. So in the end, there's only one true savior, and his name is Jesus Christ. I don't know, but that was a joke. Imagine after all this talk, I suddenly make this a pitch for the church. No, the one true savior still is the internet. For all its flaws, destabilizes this reverence. Memes shred old hierarchies. Satire punches institutional pretensions. Decentralized voices refuse to obey old rules of what matters. Remember how people joked online about the protesters smearing paintings? The memes weren't attacking art, they were attacking the ridiculousness of caring more about frames than futures. The internet's chaotic humor is a survival instinct. It's a subconscious rebellion against the value systems we were handed. But it's fragile, because if we don't consciously nurture it, the old hierarchies reassert themselves. Just more subtly. Through curated TikTok trends, through corporate meme campaigns, through aestheticized activism that changes nothing. And it's that part, that chaos of the internet, that we need to save. So the real question isn't whether the internet saved us. It's whether we are willing to save what the internet made possible. A culture where reverence isn't demanded. It's earned. If we can recognize that high culture was a scam, that pop culture was a managed rebellion, and that the internet cracked the gates but didn't destroy the castle, what now? Do we just accept that everything is corrupted? Do we just roll our eyes and keep scrolling? Or do we fight? Not for the old museums or the Hollywood ceremonies, but for the messy, chaotic, uncurated culture that's still trying to be born. The choice we need to make is between reverence and revolution. We can cling to dead hierarchies, preserving statues, paintings, industries, and systems that barely pretend to care about us. Or we can build something alive. A culture that isn't about monuments, but about movements. A culture that doesn't just preserve the past, but creates the future, recklessly, joyfully, imperfectly. Internet culture at its best already showed us a glimpse. A meme made by a 14-year-old in a bedroom, reaching more people than a $100 million ad campaign. A fan fiction community crafting entire mythologies more powerful than corporate franchises. What would we do without the smut? Real culture isn't hierarchical, it's viral. It spreads because it touches something real, not because it's ordained by a council of elites. If we want to protect the chaotic democratization the internet unleashed, we have to resist the forces trying to tame it. Let's create our own scam, not with taxes, but with memes. Step 1. Reward creation, not curation. Support small artists, share weird projects, celebrate originality, not just production value. Step 2. Stay suspicious of platform hierarchies. Remember that algorithms aren't neutral. They push profit, not truth. Seek out things beyond your For You page. Step 3. Value process over polish. Cultural legitimacy is a trap. A kid's rough meme might be more important than a studio's $200 million movie. And the last step, defend chaotic spaces. The more messy, unmoderated corners of the internet matter. They are the petri dishes where future culture grows. The real revolution will be emotional literacy. Because beyond all that, we have to retrain our emotional instincts. Because the real programming wasn't just telling us what to admire, it was telling us what to feel. Feel awe at marble statues, feel shame at silly memes, feel anger at protesters, but indifference to collapsing ecosystems. If we can flip that, if we can teach ourselves and each other to feel reverence for creativity, freedom and connection, and suspicion for hierarchies, status and empty spectacle, that would be a revolution deeper than any political coup. That would be a cultural uprising from the roots. Because culture isn't just art and movies. Culture is how we create together. It's the stories we tell about what matters. It's the feelings we share about what's sacred. If we surrender that to institutions, to money, to brands, to billionaires, then we lose more than taste. We lose the ability to imagine better worlds. But if we take it back, in memes, in music, in messy homemade videos, we're not just building entertainment, we're building escape routes. Escape routes out of dead hierarchies, out of dying systems, into something messier, freer, truer. Maybe your gut feeling that the museum is boring as wasn't wrong. Maybe you weren't too dumb to appreciate high art. Maybe you were too alive to worship dead things. And maybe, just maybe, you already know what real culture feels like. It's the thing that didn't need anyone's permission to make you feel seen, heard, or understood. But until the big revolution, let's keep watching some YouTube and find out why we hate femininity and why Cassie, you know, the hot chick from Euphoria, actually won feminism. Click here to find out. See you next time.